Today is December the 10th, 2012. I'm talking to Jim Hogue, and I'm Nancy Youngerman. So, give me your full name.
James M. Hogue.
Why did your parents select that name? Was it?
In all honesty, I don't know. I have no idea. I think I'm named after, I think James came from Jacob, from a great-grandfather, but other than that, I don't know.
And what's the history of Hogue? I mean, was it?
My father wasn't Jewish.
Ah.
My mother's family immigrated to this country about 1919.
From?
Russia. They left Russia in 1917 during the Bolshevik Revolution. It took them 2 years approximately to get here. And they went from Russia to Broken Bow, Oklahoma.
Why?
Well, it's the story of most Jewish families in the Southwest. There was another family member in Oklahoma who helped support them to come to Broken Bow. And my grandfather had a general store in Broken Bow, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Non-Jewish?
No, this
Jewish,
was my mother's
okay.
side.
Oh, your
my
mother's
mother's
side. Okay.
side was Jewish.
Got it.
My father's side was not. My father grew up in Idaville, Oklahoma, which is 13 miles from Broken Bow, Oklahoma. And somehow they met. And after they met, my parents moved to Nashville, Arkansas, where my father worked for a Jewish merchant by the name of Redmen. And I was born in a home in Nashville, Arkansas in 1939.
1939. So how did we get here to Dallas?
As quickly as I could.
Right, you did.
My father's employment brought him here in 1941.
Oh. So
I grew up here.
So you moved here when you were 2 years old?
Your mathematics is wonderful.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
I do not. My parents had me after they'd been married about 10 years and decided one was enough.
Gee, they're smart, aren't they?
But after looking at me, I guess they were.
So I have how your family came here. Were there any other members of your family in this area?
No, my father had siblings in Fort Worth, but nobody else lived in Dallas.
Do you ever get back to the South? Is there any relatives there?
Well, it's really not the South. It's more from here. It's actually the Northeast. But
well,
to get to
Arkansas.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, yeah.
Oklahoma, no. When you say that, I think of Oklahoma because that's where I used to go to visit my grandparents when I was a child. So.
How far is that from Tulsa?
It's a long way. There's a place called Broken Arrow, which sometimes people get confused with Broken Bow, and Broken Arrow is close to Tulsa. But Broken Bow is closer to Texarkana.
Did you grow up in a religious household?
Not at all. Not at all. When my mother's family immigrated from Russia to the United States, as most Jewish families at that point in time, they had to leave everything behind, and they were very determined to integrate into American society and make a living. And in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, there were only 3 Jewish families, and so there was no religion from that point on. Now, what happened prior to that in Russia, I don't know.
Well, you seemed, from what I know about you, to catch on to the Jewish religion in the community in a hurry. What was your inspiration? What was your connection?
I think growing up in Dallas and growing up in a part of Dallas where there were very few Jews, which was East Dallas. And I went to Woodrow Wilson High School in 1957. 2007, our graduating class was 525, and there were only 5 Jews in the graduating class. And so most of my association during my 3 years in high school was a large involvement with ACA and BBG. And
What got you there, though?
Friends from religious school. I went to Temple Emmanuel in South Dallas.
Oh.
That's where I grew up in terms of religion. So the friends from there and just wanted to be with them. And so I became very involved in ACA and BBG and made a lot of lifelong friends in that. And then one thing led to another, and went to college and was in the Jewish fraternity, API.
What college?
University of Texas at Austin, although at that time that was the only one.
That's right.
So that was the initiation of my involvement, the friends that I made in ACA and BBG.
And you still give some names of the friends you grew up with in Dallas that you still see to this day.
Herb Weitzman, we were pledge brothers at the University of Texas. Martin Schaefer, his brother Don Schaefer, Bob Swango. There were a lot of us that went to school at the University of Texas and were APIs all came back here to Dallas. Jay Ungerman, I believe you know who he is.
What's his middle name?
I don't know that.
It's Wolf.
Okay.
That's funny. That you're married
Yes,
to?
it's a leading question. Yannette Hogue, and Yannette Siegelman Hogue. Is from El Paso.
And how many children do you have?
We have 2 daughters, Mindy and Elise, and they are currently 43 and 44. And Elise lives in DC, and Mindy lives in New York City. We have 2 granddaughters with Mindy, and Macy, who is 11, and Taylor, who is 9.
I bet you're very spoiled. You're the only guy.
Even the dog is a girl.
You've been involved in so many organizations. What was the first, what is your earliest memory of connecting? What organization was it?
Right after Yannette and I were married, which was in 1964, we got involved with the Federation, the Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas, and subsequently we were in one of the first young leadership groups. It may have been the first, I don't recall. And that was really going back to, gosh, I guess the late 60s, I can't remember now. So somewhere in that era. So.
And you went on to more things. I wouldn't say bigger and better things, but that paralleled your devotion to Federation.
Well, it was, everybody has mentors and role models, and Janice and Arnold Sweet were certainly ours. We were in their young leadership group, and we were part of the group that went to Israel in 1974, where there was 30 of us, which we remain close friends with all of that group pretty much ever since. And that was really what got us entrenched in the Jewish community.
Boy, they've had an influence on many lives.
Right.
What is your current connection now to the community, the Jewish community, as far as leadership?
The organization that I'm primarily involved with at this point in time is the Dallas Holocaust Museum, the Center for Education and Tolerance, which I am a past chairman of, and helping them with their building plans for the future for a permanent home for the Holocaust Museum. And that is primarily what my focus is at this point in time.
I asked this question, but I probably don't need to ask you since you weren't brought up in a religious family and your last name is Hogue. But did you meet with any kind of anti-Semitism?
Very much so.
Really?
Yeah. Because my name is Hogue, and there are no Jewish, well, actually, that's not true. I have since found out there was a rabbi in San Diego with the last name of Hogue. And I have found out that there are a couple of Hogues, or at least one, in, I believe it was Philadelphia, in a congregation in Philadelphia. I always thought that I was the only Jewish Hogue in the world. But
I thought so too.
Yes, growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in during the Second World War, I met with a lot of anti-Semitism. A lot of people knew I was Jewish because I went to Temple Emmanuel, and not to try to hide it. And I was a small kid, and I used to get beat up a lot. And I think when you go back and look at that, I think that was part of the reason that I have become so involved in what I've done in the community as well. And so and the other thing is that because, you know, I don't fit the stereotype of a Jewish person, and don't have a Jewish last name, I hear a lot of things that maybe wouldn't be
That maybe you wouldn't hear.
that maybe wouldn't be said if somebody thought I was Jewish.
How do you handle that?
It depends on what's said and who's saying it. I try and handle it by educating people and asking them, you know, about where they got that notion, that idea, and trying to help educate them, change their opinions, and make them sensitive to their words about everybody.
Yeah. It's funny how certain stereotypes come to your mind. This last election with how could any Jew vote for anyone but Romney, you know, it's misinformation.
True. True.
And I would imagine your mother having a Russian accent, that might have drawn some attention.
Well, my mother really didn't have a Russian accent.
Oh.
She came to this country when she was 10, and she really had lost her Russian accent through the years at school.
Are either of them still alive?
No. My mother was born in 1907, which means she'd have been 105 this year. So.
Mine made it to 102. So.
Oh, well, that's wonderful.
Yeah. I've heard you've had two remarkable children. Tell me about each one of them.
Well, of course, thank you for saying that, but of course we're prejudiced. You know, our older daughter, well, first of all, they're 2 years less than 2 days, less than a year apart. So it's sort of like we had twins. But Mindy, our oldest daughter, has been very accomplished in terms of her education. She went to Duke, went to New York, and got a master's in physical therapy, worked in Harlem with underprivileged kids in Harlem, at schools in Harlem, and until she had our second granddaughter. And at that point, she became a mother full-time, but has since volunteered with many organizations helping out from co-chairing her synagogue's projects and going to New Orleans to help build homes in from Katrina, helping with what has just recently happened with the hurricane disaster in New York City, and trying to also bring the neighborhood together to help other people in the community who really had major issues with this last disaster in New York City, as well as starting a program of teaching younger children in school about how you help others in the community by starting in the 2nd and 3rd grade and taking them to community projects such as feeding people at stew pots and things of that nature. And she was also very much involved in a program helping girls who may have been abused verbally or physically by bringing them together to help with pets, and particularly with dogs, that they would adopt and help them if they feel like if they could care for a dog and see how they can help that dog, and which has been adopted, then it gives them more self-esteem about what they're doing, etc. And so Mindy has done wonderful things like that, and teaching her own children at a very young age, 9 and 11, and about how you reach out in the community to help others. Elise has been a political activist, an environmentalist. She went to Vassar and then got a master's in forest ecology from the University of Michigan, and has worked for Bat Conservation International in Austin, saving bats around the world for a fellow by the name of Merlin Tuttle, who has been the international figure for why bats are good for the world.
What do you think got her into that?
Well, that was sort of in between her, she worked there in between her Vassar and Michigan experience. And so she would just move to Austin and sort of fell into that job. And then after she got her forest ecology master's degree, she then went to work for Greenpeace, was involved in marching in Seattle during the WTO, where, as you may remember, people were rounded up and put in jail. She was put in jail, and she's sort of a natural leader, and people gravitate to her. And 2 interesting stories. One was that a jailer came by the first night they were in jail.
A tailor?
Jailer.
Jailer,
From
okay.
a southern accent. And handed them a note, and the note read, "It is the first night of Hanukkah, and miracles do happen." And the second thing that came out of there was she got a new job. She went to work for Rainforest Action Network and moved from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. She worked there, I guess, about 6 or 7 years. And then she was employed by, and I'm getting ready to forget the organization, its name, the Democratic, we just went like. No. Anyway, let me think about it for a minute, it'll come back to me. But any event, it was a Democratic advocacy organization, and she became the political director and the campaign director, and then was asked to move to DC the year before the Obama election, before Obama was elected, and worked on his campaign. And actually was meeting with the White House staff after he was elected once every week or so. And in February of this past year, she left that organization to go out on her own and do consulting work Soros, S-O-R-O-S, not George, but his son,
Oh.
and who is instrumental in trying to bring election equality. They are trying to overcome the super PACs that the Supreme Court said was okay, corporations. So.
And so there's these two daughters, but your wife is equally involved and decorated for her accomplishments, which some of them are.
Well, we've been very fortunate. We've been married for 48 years now, and we've each shared the same interests. And going back to the Young Leadership Group, we were the first couple in Dallas in 1974 to be awarded the Young Leadership Award by the Jewish Federation. First couple, and at the same time. And so we've actually, Yvette and I actually led the Young Leadership Group 2 different times in Dallas. And she has...
Led meaning going to Israel?
No, well, no, meaning the group.
Oh, okay.
Putting the group together and bringing programming, et cetera. Although she and I both have led missions to Israel. And we've led them together as well as separate. And but she has been involved in all sorts of leadership capacities within the Federation, whether it be the women's division, whether it be campaign chair, or other areas, various committees, et cetera, as well as being on many boards in the community, American Jewish Committee, Legacy, National Conference, National Council of Jewish Women. She's been involved in many, many organizations. We've fortunately, as I said, had the opportunity to share this passion for the Jewish community.
Quite a remarkable family, huh?
Well,
I can't wait to hear about your grandchildren in 5 years.
right.
I want to backtrack a little. Did your mother have any stories about the old country?
No, not really. Which is a shame that I didn't have the opportunity to really record any members of the family. She had an older brother that may have had more. The stories I remember were when they left Russia, because the Russians were bringing all the young men into the army. They had to smuggle my uncle out in a trunk. And they traveled through Europe for several years before they got here. The Redmen Family, which may be a name you're familiar with, from Tyler, Rose Redmen was the first cousin of my grandmother. And they were instrumental in bringing my family over to Oklahoma. And but they were really too young. In fact, there were conflicting stories about where they even entered the country. I have a letter from a great uncle who was vouching for my uncle for work purposes, saying that they came in through Baltimore. My mother always told me that they came in through Nova Scotia. We were in Nova Scotia, and I went to try and research it, and there was no evidence of them coming in through Nova Scotia. So I'm not quite sure. The letter from my great uncle says they all came together, but I heard conflicting stories, and I've not been able to go back and confirm this.
And you still have those letters?
I do.
Are there any particular role models? You said Arnie and Janice, but any other role models that have been an inspiration for you?
You know, I think as one grows up and you have different friends and you see what people do, I had a very close friend in Houston by the name of Myron Nathan, who was several years older than I am, who was regional Olive Godot of AZA. He was a mentor, I would say. Zion of Balaban was a very important part of our life in terms of when we were involved in the leadership program. But there are many others. You know, I would just say that the friends that we've had, the people we've worked together with in the community, we've all probably been an influence on each other. I believe very strongly that one of the great rewards you get by working in the community is the wonderful people you get to meet.
Yeah.
And that is really the reward that I would say we have had for working in the community.
So true. The stars. The stars. Before we wrap this up, is there anything that I might not have covered that you would like to add?
I don't know how much you want or don't want of the various organizations that I've been involved with. Which, you asked about my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
And so,
go down.
I didn't know
I thought Federation.
You know, I'm the past president of the Federation.
Yeah.
I was the first organization that I was president of here was the Jewish Vocational Counseling Services, which was, I don't remember way back when, and which is no longer part of that. Is no longer in existence. It was merged into Jewish Family Service.
Oh, really?
So I've been involved with the Jewish National Fund. I was president of that here many years ago. I've been chair of the Jewish Community Relations Council here. I've been on many different boards. Currently on the, actually I should have said this earlier, currently on the ADL Regional Board.
Oh, yeah.
And many other different boards. I guess, you know, the two most meaningful positions I believe I've held is president of the Federation and chair of the Dallas Holocaust Museum. Although every one of them been meaningful in their own way and have had and they've all been wonderful experiences, and certainly none of these leadership roles go without challenges, but that's part of
Oh, you really brought this, the Holocaust to life. I mean, your leadership. When I was on the board, this is really.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't ask you, what congregation do you belong to?
Share this one. I grew up in Temple Emmanuel, as I mentioned. We were founders of Temple Shalom, but because Yannette came from an ortho-conservative background from El Paso, we ended up moving to Sheriff Israel. She was more comfortable in that environment, and I'm comfortable within the environment. So
I see. I see.
I'm flexible.
Any leadership involvement outside the Jewish community? Well, at Crested View.
Well, yeah, I went to the State Democratic Convention many years ago as a delegate. Actually, so I was involved in politics for a while. When the Columbian Club was functioning, I was on their board for several times. Right now, I am chairing a capital campaign for the Mount Crested View Performing Arts Center, which is a $23 million campaign.
Much time do you spend in Crested Butte?
We spend most of the summer there, and then back and forth in the winter as our schedule permits.
What a life. Well, it's been a pleasure interviewing you. I've learned some new things. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you for what you do in our community. It takes a village, as they say.
I didn't ask you one question. Are we finished?
No, you're good.
Oh, very trite question. What sports do you like? You're in great shape. You do something to active.
Well, I always played sports, and in college played a lot of intramurals, football, handball, baseball. So, and I've run 4 marathons, including Boston, New York twice.
Boston?
And Dallas. And currently I ski and walk a lot, and I don't run anymore. But just trying to keep myself in good shape by watching what I eat, which is a seafood diet, which you know what that is.
And discipline, and discipline.
And discipline.